When Dr. Peter Asher appeared on this podcast and elsewhere, he discussed something that fundamentally changed how many of us think about longevity and healthy aging. He explained that one of the major causes of death in older people isn't the dramatic heart attack or stroke we might imagine, but rather the cascade of events that follows a fall. An elderly person falls, becomes immobile or bedridden, catches some sort of infection related to contact with a bed, or experiences post-surgical complications from lack of circulation, and that's ultimately what takes them out, which was shocking to learn because most of us, myself included, thought it would be cardiovascular disease or cerebral vascular incidents that would be the primary threat. But this insight led to a whole notion that's gaining more popularity nowadays about longevity being fundamentally tied to maintaining functional capacities like grip strength and one's ability to jump and land safely. And jumping and landing is all about eccentric control, that ability to decelerate your body and absorb force. And this eccentric control, this eccentric capacity, is precisely what we lose as we age, which is why the question of whether skipping would be a good activity for people in their 60s, 70s, or 80s to undertake carefully as a way to learn and maintain eccentric control becomes so important. And I think the answer is absolutely yes. It's so important because we lose the ability to apply eccentric force, whether it's fast or maximal. And I can point to my own dad as a living example of this principle in action. He's 78 years old now, and was an elite athlete when he was younger, and he's probably averaged running 4 days a week for almost his entire adult life, which is remarkable in itself. And in 2019, when he was 73 or 74 years old, he ran the New York City Marathon in 5 hours and 2 minutes, which isn't just staying active for his age but genuine athletic performance. And while he doesn't run marathons anymore, he still runs 4 days a week, covering about 20 to 25 miles total. But here's what's really key and what I want everyone to pay attention to. 2 of those 4 days are skipping sessions where he walks for 30 seconds, skips for 30 seconds, then strides as fast as he can, as fast as his capacity will allow for 30 seconds, then walks again, then skips, then strides, in this repeating pattern. And it's so key, it really is, because for me the ability to express yourself maximally through running represents something fundamental about vitality. And I've already said I don't feel like most people can actually do this anymore, but I don't know if there is a better single metric, a better measurement for whatever word you want to use here, vitality, health, functional capacity, than the ability to safely express maximal speed as an individual. And sure, you can choose VO2 max, you can choose grip strength, you can choose all of these different markers that researchers have identified, and I don't feel like any of them are quite as good as the ability to just run maximally. So let's start with that premise. If we feel like that capacity is important, and you can certainly argue whether it's the most important or the 10th most important, but we know it's important, then the question becomes, how do we get there? How do we build or rebuild this capacity safely? And as we've been discussing, I think skipping is the way, which is why I'm on board with the skipping movement and want to get everybody skipping, because it is, as I said, about developing your ability to work on those eccentric force capacities and move in a way in which you can actually express yourself again. And striding sounds like something that people could work up to as the next progression. But the question is, how do you know after doing the skip workout that you're quote unquote ready to stride and start doing stride workouts? And I should mention that these workouts, because we did one yesterday, leave you feeling great when you finish them. And this is an aspect of exercise that I think most people don't talk about enough. Unfortunately, because there's this prevailing mentality of leaving it all on the mat, taking every set to failure in the gym, or doing these long runs where you're just absolutely shredded afterward. And those approaches aren't great for teaching people how to be healthy, because people are exhausted afterward. They're tired, they overtrain quickly, and then some people say there's no such thing as overtraining. And it's like, yeah, if you can sleep all day, eat all day, and your profession is to train and recover, maybe overtraining is hard to achieve. But there is absolutely such a thing as having a stressful life with work and family obligations and wanting to be healthy and trying to incorporate exercise in a way that actually feeds the rest of your life rather than depleting you. And I think these workouts that we did, the workout we did yesterday specifically, left me feeling great posturally, energetically, mood-wise. I slept great last night, felt great this morning, had a great workout in the gym as I mentioned earlier, so I want to encourage people to give this a try. And in doing that, I want to give them a practical roadmap they can actually follow. Start with a warm-up of 10 to 15 minutes to get the body ready. Then do your skipping intervals of about 50 meters or so. And people always ask whether they need special surfaces. Could they do it on lawn, dirt, or concrete? Does it matter? And the answer is no. It doesn't matter. If you've got really flat grass, that's perfect. But if you don't and need to do it on concrete, no problem. So basically, there's no cost to this except a little bit of time and attention. You do 10 to 15 of those 50-meter skips. Skip out, walk back, repeat. And if you need a little bit longer recovery than the probably 90 seconds it takes to walk back, take it, not a big deal. Because the quality here is the determining factor. And as I said, you're not trying to get really fatigued from plyometric work. This is a plyometric session and you want to be relatively fresh going into each repetition. And that's going to take, for most people doing a maximal skip over the course of 50 meters, about 90 seconds of recovery. Though if you're really explosive and a really good skipper, it might take 3 minutes, and that's fine. Because as we've established, you want to feel good at the end of the session. You don't want to be beasted or completely destroyed. And now if you can progress from the skips, and you can stride really well, and if you can stride really well, maybe you can eventually sprint really well. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't be tired at the end of the session. But the quality of the movement has to be the governor there, not the capacity. Not this mentality of, I got to get the work done, and I don't care how that work looks or what it looks like. I just got to get it done. Because no, with high-intensity work, with sprint work, your governor is always the quality of the work. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Always quality over quantity or volume. So the question becomes, how does one transition into striding, and what does that look like? Because it's essentially saying, okay, I'm going to sprint. But it's not a full sprint because I'm going to hold back a bit. But how do you hold back and still maintain the expressive part? Because the expressive part is a little hard to describe in words, but it's about being tall with your posture, as if you're being pulled up by a string from your head. And it has a profound psychological effect where you just feel your body opening up into natural movement. You don't have to think about coordinating the arm swing or leg lift. It just happens. You're in this full blossoming expression of movement, and it's really wonderful. And if we describe the difference between all of the gait patterns just through the amount of space that you take up on the planet, it becomes clearer. When you walk, it's a small space. When you jog, you're taking up a little bit more space. When you run, it's a bit more space. When you start to stride, it's more space again. And then when you sprint, you're up here being maximally expressive and taking up maximum space. So just think about it from that perspective of expanding your movement envelope. But the other part that's crucial to understand is that jogging and running typically happen behind your center of mass. You crash onto the ground and push back. You have this propulsive phase where there's not a lot of braking, just a long propulsive phase that happens with the foot pushing back behind your center of mass. Whereas striding and sprinting happen more in front of your center of mass, where there's actually a longer eccentric phase where you drive a lot of force into the ground in front of your body. Then you propel yourself off with what's actually a very short propulsive phase. So think about it that way. It's a bigger shape. It's primarily more in front of your center of mass, and it requires much more eccentric strength and control. And this is important because you need to understand that you probably can't sprint, and most of the people listening to this cannot sprint in the true sense. And I'm not telling you not to try or that sprinting isn't valuable. I'm saying you do not currently have that movement strategy available to you in a safe and effective way. Because almost everybody listening will be able to walk, and if you can walk, you could probably jog. And most people on the planet can walk, jog, and maybe run at a moderate pace. But most people on the planet can't stride effectively. They can't get any faster than about 75% of what their true capacity might be because they just don't have the tissue quality, joint integrity, or neuromuscular coordination to do it safely anymore. And if you're a kid, you can do all of this. You can run and stride along all day without thinking about it. But you get to a certain point where our tissues and our joint systems simply do not have the capacity to run that fast safely, and we definitely don't have it when we're talking about true sprinting, which is why this progressive approach starting with skipping is so critical. It's about rebuilding these capacities systematically rather than just trying to go out and run fast one day and ending up injured, because injury is the enemy of longevity and sustained health. And that's why the workout structure matters so much. You want to finish feeling energized rather than destroyed. You want to wake up the next day feeling good rather than broken down. You want this practice to add to your life rather than subtract from it. And that's the fundamental difference between this approach and the more is better, harder is better mentality that dominates so much of fitness culture. Because the goal isn't to prove how tough you are or how much suffering you can endure. The goal is to maintain and ideally improve your functional capacity across the entire lifespan. to still be moving well and expressing yourself physically when you're 70 or 80 years old, like my dad. And that requires a different mindset, one that prioritizes quality and sustainability over intensity and volume, one that recognizes that exercise should enhance your life rather than deplete it. And this is why these skipping and striding protocols are so powerful. They give you a structured, progressive pathway to maintain high-level movement capacity without beating yourself into the ground. They let you work on genuine physical qualities like eccentric strength, reactive capacity, and movement coordination in a way that's challenging but not destructive. And most importantly, they're accessible to almost anyone regardless of where they're starting from, because you can scale the intensity and volume to match your current capacity and gradually build from there. Walking before you jog, jogging before you run, skipping before you stride. Always letting quality be your guide rather than some arbitrary prescription of sets and reps or distance and pace. And this approach respects the fundamental reality that our bodies are complex adaptive systems that respond to consistent, appropriate challenges over time rather than sporadic heroic efforts that leave us broken down. So when you go out to do these workouts, remember that the goal is to feel good, to move well, to gradually expand your movement capacity in a sustainable way, not to prove anything to anyone or push yourself into exhaustion. And if you keep that principle in mind, if you let quality govern your training rather than ego or arbitrary metrics, you'll find that you can maintain remarkably high levels of physical function well into later life, just like my dad running and skipping and striding at 78, because that's what this is really all about. Maintaining the capacity for full human movement expression across the entire lifespan, being able to run and play and express yourself physically not just when you're young but throughout your entire life. And skipping is the gateway to that, because it develops the eccentric control and plyometric capacity that underlies all higher speed movement. It teaches your body how to absorb and redirect force efficiently. It builds the tissue resilience and neuromuscular coordination required for safe, effective striding and eventually even sprinting if that's appropriate for you. And most importantly, it does all of this in a way that feels good, that leaves you energized rather than depleted, that fits into a busy life rather than consuming it. So yes, let's get everybody skipping. Let's make this a movement, because the ability to move well and express yourself physically through running and jumping and playing isn't just about fitness metrics or athletic performance. It's about vitality. It's about maintaining your full humanity as you age. It's about still feeling like yourself in your body when you're 60 or 70 or 80 years old. And if there's a better single metric for that kind of health and vitality than the ability to safely run at your maximal capacity, I genuinely don't know what it would be.